Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be discussing D&D stuff. We're going to do a video, a two-part video actually, on Slaad. So the first part will be discussing the creature itself, and the second part will be a one-shot that I created about 2.5 years ago that did really well. Players were discussing that all the way up to like 8 months after we'd finished that one-shot. People were still referencing it. It was a very popular one-shot that I ran. And I kind of wanted to talk about why Slaad were one of my favorite creatures to run, and give you the chance to look over my notes and for me to kind of explain my mindset of why I like these creatures and maybe how you can use them in your game. So for those who are totally unfamiliar with Slaad, they are a creature in D&D. They've been in the game for quite a long time. Their iteration in 5th edition is pretty close to what the older editions did, but of course feel free to kind of take from the older editions as well. We'll be discussing the ones on page 274 of the monster manual, the base 5e monster manual. And in that book, it contains a red Slaad, blue Slaad, green Slaad, gray Slaad, and death Slaad. Don't worry, we're going to go over the distinctions and kind of like why they matter and what the differences are here shortly. But as just an overview, there are beings of pure chaos from the plane of limbo, which, if you're unfamiliar, is an ever-changing landscape that is kind of the embodiment of pure chaos in D&D. In the planescape kind of genre of games, there's typically a plane for the various alignments, right? So there's true chaos, true lawful, true good, true evil, and then there's these rings in between all of them, and then there's the primal ones of like fire, earth, water, and air. So that's kind of the idea of a planescape, and I'll put it on the screen of the image of, I think they call it the Great Wheel. You don't need to worry about that. We're just going into limbo to get the Slaad. Now, the Slaad are these giant bipedal toad people. And some of them can shape change, so they won't always be these weird toad people. The lesser Slaad are always these weird toad people. And I think we can just jump into the first one, the red Slaad, which is the weakest of the Slaad. And I think I can give you kind of a good example of what makes them fun. So the red Slaad, it's only a challenge rating 5 creature, so you can throw these into your game pretty early on, although I would recommend you wait until your party's a little higher level so you can utilize a bunch of different ones and kind of get all the fun out of it. But the red Slaad, as you can see the stat block in front of you, there's nothing too special, right? You're thinking, whatever. It's got magic resistance, it's got regeneration, who cares? But the thing is, if you look under the claw attack, it talks about a Slaad egg. And the thing is much like the xenomorphs in the Alien franchise, Slaads put eggs in people that burst out of their chests as tadpoles. And this is where you kind of start to see the interesting part, is they have this real body horror element to them. The way they reproduce is only through fighting. Either the red Slaad scratches you or a blue Slaad scratches you. And this is kind of the cycle. And there's all these questions of like, well, if they only get created by people coming in contact with them, either being scratched, how did the first Slaad come up? You can kind of play with that idea. Being from the elemental plane of chaos, the belief is that they just kind of appeared one day out of the storm of chaos. Just these weird frog people emerge, but you can do whatever you want with that. Now, looking at the blue Slaad, so the blue Slaad's melee attack, if you look under the claw attack, it says that if you get hit by one, you can get a disease called the Chaos Phage. And what the Chaos Phage does is it turns you into a red Slaad, and the two do not get along. So red Slaad hate blue Slaad and will attack each other on sight, and that's also kind of the fun of it. It's this weird thing where red Slaad create tadpoles that become either blue Slaads or green Slaads, and blue Slaads attack people and turn them into red Slaads or green Slaads. And what determines if you become just the opposite Slaad or a green Slaad is the user's magic ability. And that also brings in another interesting question, is if the host ability, right, magical ability, is a factor in which type of Slaad it is, does that Slaad contain that person in some sense? If you have a tadpole in you and it comes out of green Slaad because you had some magical ability, and that magical ability is transferred over. What else is transferred over? And I kind of like to run them as these tragic creatures that maybe forget who they are, but they're still who they were before in some capacity. Either the red Slaad, right, like maybe might contain some of the memories of its host, and that's why it can get its magical ability. And same with the blue Slaad. And I think this lets you make them really flavorful and kind of creative, as you can think of all these ways and this individuality and personality, because that's a big thing about the chaos creatures, is they all like are very individualistic, right? Individuality is a big part of chaos in D&D, and kind of being who you want to be and doing what you want to do, and that is really translated into these creatures of chaos. And I just love that. So what I like to do is I like to kind of think about who they were beforehand and run them as tragic creatures that were infected in some way, and in a way are still who they were before, but they've lost a lot of who they were. They don't maybe remember who they were before, but all of that personality still kind of comes through, maybe exaggerated by the fact that the absence of everything else. And that's what really makes them kind of fun to me. I think when I think of very chaotic creatures, I think very emotion driven, very thought driven, and not really following the rules or the laws or thinking things through. It's just like whatever it comes to mind is kind of what they do. They're very spontaneous in that kind of way, but they don't like not have a personality either. The personality is really like the driving factor of it. So, for example, for the green Slaad, right? The green Slaad are these magical casters, and the whole point of a green Slaad, like the whole drive, the thing that they're trying to do is to become a gray Slaad. And how did they do that? Well, there was some sort of magic ritual. And I think the reason why the writing for that is so incredibly vague is because I believe that it's unique to every green Slaad. I believe when a green Slaad believes that it has the knowledge it needs to perform the ritual to become a gray Slaad, it does. And it's more about, thought and willing it into existence more so than like an actual thing they have to learn. And that's what makes them really kind of fun for me, because the green Slaad, the whole point of the green Slaad's existence is to learn whatever random thing it chose to learn. And once it learns enough of it, it has the knowledge to become a gray Slaad. So you can do all types of hilarious things with green Slaads. They can shapeshift, so they can show up to the players as anything. They can ask, just be for these really weird, zany characters that are trying to learn about something very specific. Of course, if you want to just keep it simple, you can have them have an extreme interest in your magical casters of your party, or be really interested in magical items that the party might possess. But you can get wonky with it and just say that, like, I don't know, the green Slaad loves ice cream and believes that once it tastes every single flavor of ice cream in existence, it will become a gray Slaad. And to that green Slaad, that's its driving goal, and it will go travel the world trying to taste every single flavor. And every time it finds another flavor, it becomes its sole purpose to taste it. And or just for an example, but you can do anything with them. And the shapeshift ability allows for a lot of really fun roleplay opportunities. As the example that my players loved the most is I had a green Slaad that was a cow in a field grazing, and the cow said moo, but not like a cow would say moo, like a person saying the word moo, but in a depressed voice, like moo. And that's all it did. It just sat there grazing, watching the cows trying to learn how to become a gray Slaad from the cows. It was just, they knew it wasn't a cow, obviously, because all the other cows sounded like cows, but it looked just like a cow, and it was speaking like a person exacerbated saying moo. And it was just a weird kind of fun throwaway encounter that really stuck out to the players. And I had that one very early on in the one shot to kind of show you that these things aren't these mindless killing machines, but they have these weird quirks to them, and you can interact with one without it resulting in combat necessarily, as they really didn't like fight the cow for no reason. Obviously, they just kind of left it be, and the cow didn't bother them. It didn't come back to bite them later on. One of the players was actually kind of rude to the cow, and I had the cow insult them. It was the only thing it said that wasn't moo, but it made sure to say moo at the beginning and the end of the sentence to kind of keep the joke going. And they loved it. They absolutely loved it. So moving on to the gray Slaad. The gray Slaad, I think, are a little bit more intelligent, a little bit more. They're like, I like to run them kind of like a secret agent of the Slaad, like because the Death Slaad are like the generals, and they're the ones that kind of lead the invasions into other planes of existence, and they're much more structured, and they're kind of just dealing with these idiots that are beneath them that are the blue, green, and red Slaads that are just these really wonky kind of crazy characters, but you need that kind of sense of structure to kind of get them there and have a reason for them existing. So I think Gray Slaad work as really good agents. You can kind of have them like infiltrating towns, and you could have information like little things. Like I like to use the fact that characters with high perceptions may notice that you walk by a guard, and then maybe like around the other corner or guarding a doorway, there's another guard that looks almost exactly like the guard that you just passed 5 minutes ago. And you know well enough that there's no way that that guard could be at the, that you just walked by, could be behind you and at this building at the same time. There's no alternate route there. And you can kind of like sow that doubt that way. Or like maybe they see the same townsfolk that they know by name 2 times in the town, and the second time they meet them, the person doesn't know who they are. Maybe it gives them a different name, something kind of weird like that. And you can kind of use this to imply that maybe there's like a bigger Slaad kind of plot, and that they're have invaded society at some level, and they're kind of these agents that are causing these outbreak of green and red Slaad by causing the initial infection some way. Moving to the last Slaad, the Death Slaad. These are, like I said, these are the masterminds. These are ones leading the invasions. How I have done it in the past is I like to have it where they kind of act as the big bad, right? They're the thing leading the invasion. Maybe they're not quite there yet, and the Gray Slaad came to a town and infected it, and have kind of started trying to open a rift to get the Death Slaad there with its armies, and the player's kind of job is to stop the Gray Slaad's plan to get the Death Slaad there and start the full invasion. You can do it as like a preemptive kind of strike. It's just like 1 or 2 Gray Slaads who've sown all this chaos, but obviously from interacting with the villagers, they've created the more Slaad, which causes more problems. And you can kind of play it that way. And I think that's a really kind of fun way to do it in the campaign that we'll discuss on Thursday. The driving force is that the village used to be a trade haven, and no one's been able to come in and out of the city or that town for a little while, that village. But usually they send like a trade wagon to the main town every week or so to get general supplies and send it back. But this week they didn't send anybody on their usual day, Wednesday. So they, they wrote to the local governor or whatever and said, "Hey, it's kind of weird. We haven't heard from this town for a while, and when we sent someone down there, like a messenger to check it out, they came back with this crazy report of these monsters, and maybe they got attacked, and that can be kind of how they, they get the description of these things." So the Death Slaad act as a really good, like, scary kind of final threat. You can run this as, the final encounter. The challenge rating 10, so you can give it as like a level 8 party or a level 9 party, and probably not too much of a issue. The only spells they have that might be a real issue are Cloud Kill and Fireball, as you can see there. But you can always just, give them something else if you're really worried about it. Cloud Kill's poison type, so a lot of parties by that level have a way of kind of dealing with poison pretty reliably. For example, I think monks are just like immune to it at like level 7 or 8, maybe it's level 6. I had a monk in my party when we did the one shot, and literally the monk couldn't take any damage. And I think we had a paladin too, and I think the paladin had some ability that made it where it was like immune to poison damage as well. So they just like beat the crap out of it, and that's fine. That's fine. That's part of it. Sometimes you have a creature that the party has class features that deal with very well, and that's good because it it highlights that their choice was effective, and you don't need every encounter to be like super lethal. Only like 1 or 2 people make it out. It's fine if like only one player is really taking any damage from the Cloud Kill and they just move out of it. That's cool. The way I did it with the generating the rift and then the Slaad coming through the rift, it gives them that second objective of, they need to get rid of that Death Slaad, but they also need to close that rift before anything else comes through it. And having that kind of secondary objective, I ended up using 2, or I think I used 3. Yeah, I used these 3 like crystal pylons I described that the energy was emerging from, and that the players could destroy the pylons by attacking it directly and breaking them. And then when they ended up breaking it, the Death Slaad kind of got sucked back through the portal, making it where if they couldn't deal with it or if it was too difficult to kill, they had an alternate way to defeat it other than, just pure force. Because at that point, you had quite a few encounters. This is the last encounter of the one shot, and they might be spent, they might have used up all their main resources. So giving them an alternate victory condition, if that is the case, is always a nice way to play it. That's most of what I wanted to talk about Slaad. There is one bit of lore that I tend not to use, but might be useful to you if you want to use Slaad, but you don't really have a way of running them. Say you think you watch this video and you think it's, they're interesting creatures, but you're like, well, it doesn't really fit in my campaign. I really am not running a planescape or anything of that nature. And although these characters are really fun and kind of can be really flavorful, I'm running a more grounded kind of game, wizards and warriors, and I'm not really typically doing all this weird plane stuff. Well, there are rules about the Slaads being enslaved using these gems in their heads that allowed you to control them. And then there was this idea that in the spawning grounds where all the Slaad originate from, they would put a gem there to control them. And I believe it was the Gith that did this to create an army of them. And you could repurpose that lore if you wanted to and just do it where like you have a wizard of some kind, an evil wizard, and maybe they in their palace have a green Slaad or something of that nature that they put a gem into to control directly. Maybe the green Slaad wandered in there trying to learn about, magic to ascend to a gray Slaad. So that's just an idea of how you can implement one or two into your game if you don't think that the Planescape idea would kind of work for you and you wanted to chuck them into a pre-existing thing you had going on. Remember, there are options. If you don't want to go the traditional route, just, wizard summon them or something, the big bad lich or whatever, summon them and threw a gem in its head, and maybe it's like a really reluctant kind of servant and it doesn't really want to help him. So like they follow the orders roughly, but don't really like care, and it can kind of be this funny interaction between the players where they can get some information about maybe the lich's hideout or the evil wizard's kind of like operation, where you don't have to do this weird like monologue at the end about the plan, but you can have this weird like just apathetic minion who really is just like doesn't want to be there, is kind of forced to be there via the gemstone, wants the kind of party to maybe like will agree to exchange information to get the gemstone removed, kind of thing, so they can go back to the plane of chaos. Is kind of another way you can roll them if you don't want to make them this large invasion or do a bigger focus on them. You can just chuck them into a game to give it a little whimsy, a little bit different, maybe shake it up a little bit. If your game's very serious and you kind of want to have a lighthearted moment, you can chuck one into your pre-existing game that way. So thank you guys for watching. If you want to see the one shot that I planned around these guys called Slaad Showdown, the video will be up this Thursday. So please check back then, and thank you for watching.